welcome back to Bunny Banter, the first and only podcast for everything Killer Bunnies. I'm your host, Matt. I almost said Hat. That would have been sad. I changed my name.
That's a pretty rough start, man.
That's a rough start. Oh well. Here with co-host Mikey. And
Hi.
there's Mikey. And as a guest today, we have Joe Slack again.
Hello.
What are we talking about today, Mikey?
Sorry, I had a Kit Kat in my mouth. We are talking about more about the London booster. There we go.
Yep, this is the final Bunny Banter before the release of London. Let's see, this episode will be released on the 18th, and London's coming out the 23rd, according to Amazon. Hopefully that's right. So it's a very exciting time. Today we will be looking at the final cards that we haven't discussed yet. So let's get right into it. For those watching on YouTube, I will have the cards up on the screen, but I'll make sure to read them off for everyone else. First card here, it's a run card, non-aggressive. Tower Bridge. May be used once by placing Tower Bridge over any two adjacent bunnies owned by the same player. After 2 rounds of play, the player may take any one British bunny from the discard pile and place it immediately between the 2 bunnies. So just to recall here, the British bunnies are the new bunnies in the London booster. There's 9 of them, and they're similar to Celebrity and Specialty. What were you saying, Mikey?
What are we doing? I can't hear you very well.
Oh,
So
hold on.
which card are we doing?
Tower Bridge.
Tower Bridge. Okay.
There we go. Okay, they should be in order in what I just sent. Okay, so we got Tower Bridge. What do you think, Joe?
I really want to read the bunny bits for this card, actually. So, right off the bat, they didn't release the bunny bits for London yet.
No, I haven't received them yet. No.
Okay, because I have a few questions about this card, right? Is this in play forever, or does it go away? Because it says from the discard pile. I mean, it doesn't say the card goes away, so does it just stay there? Do I get to keep getting a steady supply of bunnies? Because that'd be kind of cool. Also powerful. I don't know. I guess I want to learn more about it. What happens if one of the 2 bunnies on one of the sides dies? Can another bunny substitute? Does it go away? I want to know more about this card, really.
Same goes for me. I maybe can answer, or at least attempt to answer, a few of those questions. So the first question you had was, does it stay in play?
Yeah.
If we compare something like Anvil, which is also a similar mechanic where the 2 bunnies leave, and then they kill the bunny after 2 rounds of play. That card also does not have a discard clause, shall we say, but we know for sure that that card is discard when it resolves. So I think if the bunny bits don't say otherwise, it's safe to assume that this is a one-time thing.
And now I just looked that card up here, and I don't know if this is a major difference. Anvil is an aggressive card, and I noticed Bunny Bridge is not.
Yes.
Or Tower Bridge.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like
it's kind of
like the reverse mechanic. You know, the Anvil kills a bunny in between 2 bunnies, and the Tower Bridge resurrects a bunny in between 2 bunnies, which is a different mechanic, so it's not a safe comparison necessarily. But
it's interesting, that's for sure.
The question about what happens if the bunnies die is something that I expect to be in the bunny bits for sure, because since you have to place it between 2 adjacent bunnies, it would be somewhat safe to imply that if one of those bunnies dies during those 2 rounds of play, this card would also be discarded, perhaps.
And that makes sense. That's kind of my assumption of what would happen.
Yeah.
I just noticed the card didn't say that.
Yeah.
But I 100% agree with you that that's the only sensible outcome, I think.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's probably clarified in the bunny bits. If not, it's probably the safe assumption, but we can always get Jeff clarification on it. It's one of those instances where you can't fit all of the necessary text on the card, so it's probably within the bunny bits. What do you think, Mikey?
Well, my first thought is that well, this is cool. Um, cool. It allows you to resurrect bunny. Cool. It allows you to resurrect British bunnies. That's neat. Um, sad day if you have, say, two bunnies and you put this through the run and you're just about the turn before you flip it over, you lose your bunny. That'd be sad. Another sad day, if you lose a bunny while you have the bridge over it, that's kind of sad too, but you talked about that. Another thing that would be kind of sad is, I don't remember which British bunny it is, but there's that one British bunny that has the oyster cracker in it. That'd be kind of a sad day too, because you might lose that bunny then. So,
You mean the yellow ball with red stripe? The British
no,
bunny?
there's one with the oyster cracker, right?
Day Trippers does. He's not a British bunny, though.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Just forget what I said then. For some reason, I thought Harry Potter, the Harry Potter one, had a British bunny. Or not a British bunny, an
Yeah,
oyster cracker.
he has the yellow ball with red stripe.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. All right. Well, those are my thoughts. All kind of negative thoughts and one incorrect thought, but that's okay.
Yeah, all things considered, this is a relatively low value card. There are some interesting implications to it, a delayed resurrection of the bunny. That's kind of nice, I often have experiments with the trade of trading for future items, offering the trade, if you give me the next $5 you draw, I'll give you this now, trading for objects that you don't even have. This is sort of a similar mechanic, except with actually using the cards you get future outcomes. So perhaps resurrecting a bunny 2 turns from now has some benefits to resurrecting a bunny compared to resurrecting a bunny instantly. Perhaps. It's hard to say for sure.
Well, if you lay this down and there are no British bunnies in the discard pile, and then somebody ends up losing a British bunny in those 2 turns, there you go. That's an advantage or a benefit.
You made
Oh
me.
yeah, I didn't think of that.
Yeah, possible. You made me also think of interaction that's similar to insurance porpoises. Now, insurance porpoises is is infamous for a certain interaction, and the identification number on the card is very fitting with how aggressive this interaction is. Insurance porpoises is the card with it's a special that you place it on a bunny along with $5, and when that bunny dies, it will be resurrected at the start of your next turn, is the idea. However, the problem is with insurance porpoises, in between the time when it dies and the time where it becomes your next turn, it is technically dead and therefore may be bought back. In a similar manner, this card, when you play it, there very well might be a British bunny in the discard. But what happens if someone buys back that British bunny and now all of a sudden this card is completely worthless? Feels bad.
Here's another thought about this card. If you play this card, and somebody has a British bunny, and so you have this in the run, and then the next card or one of the next 2 cards is a weapon. You play this card, and then in one of your next 2 turns, you kill the British bunny, and then you can get the British bunny.
There you go, pro strats. Yeah, it's nice to see a sufficient amount of cards that make the British bunnies somewhat relevant. We've already seen a few in the previous episodes that we discussed, but it's nice to see more that directly interact with the British bunnies. Because oftentimes, as far as bunnies in the discard pile go, a lot of them will be ignored. It's not very often you're going to buy back a blue sinister, for example. You might not even buy back a double or triple specialty because there's the pink lethal in the discard pile, and that's the obvious one to buy back. So it's nice to see cards that interact with these different types of bunnies so that they see more action. There's more gameplay going on with these bunnies. They're not just one-time use and then it's like, okay, they're done. They might as well have been a standard bunny. Anything else we want to say on this card before we move on here?
Not for me.
Okay. Let me open up the next card here. Next card is 2-Day Pass. It's a run card that is aggressive. It says may be used once by a player to force an opponent to exchange 2 of his Underground Station cards in the bunny circle for 1 of yours. So it's very similar to something like Bunny Exchange or Carrot Exchange or Zodiac Exchange or any of those types of cards except for Underground Stations. What are your thoughts, Mikey?
Sorry, I'm trying to find it here. Okay. I kind of got lost. Oh, I'm just having troubles today. All right. Okay. That's interesting. The idea of having or trading, but I guess that makes sense because the more Underground Stations you have, the longer you're likely to have a bunny with the oyster cracker. Depending on how many there are. You might have 2, or you might have the only one, so that's kind of neat. It could make you, I mean, this would be, obviously it's an aggressive card because it has the pink box, but it would make you kind of a target dependent upon circumstances, such as if another person has I guess that other person would have a Underground Station, so they might not want to target the bunnies that you or the bunnies that you get in the Underground Station, but they might target you in other ways. I'm sorry, I'm really tired, so this is kind of sounding like jumbled up mess. But anyway,
You're fine.
let's really talk.
What do you think, Joe?
Now, and I think Mikey alluded to this. When you move a Underground Station, the bunnies stay inside the station, right?
We can assume so based on the other cards that we have that steal Underground Stations, and they also move the bunnies. So that is a safe assumption.
Okay, so I think that actually makes this a really, a really powerful card. You know, if you have a bunny you want in a Underground Station and it goes away, you whip this out and take it right back. Assuming, you know, the person who took it has 2 Underground Stations.
Very good point. Real quick here, not related to this card, but I think I realized why Mikey's confused. I believe we skipped the first card in the list I have here, so we'll come back around to it at the end. We still need to talk about Station Snatch, but we'll come back around to that one. For this one, yeah, I think it's pretty exciting that in some sense it's like you're getting bunny exchange as well, except for cheaper in some circumstances, because maybe you have an empty Underground Station and maybe an opponent has 2 Underground Stations that both have a bunny in them. You know, especially if they've played some of the cards that we discussed previously, where you could get a lot of Underground Stations from the draw pile. So it's quite possible that they have multiple bunnies inside Underground Stations. If that's the case, then all of a sudden you traded 1 Underground Station for 2 Underground Stations and 2 bunnies, where presumably these bunnies are high value because the oyster crackers would tend to be placed on a high value bunny. So that's you know, it seems like from face value, it seems like kind of like a filler card where it's like, okay, we have Bunny Exchange, we have Carrot Exchange, so we need something for Underground Stations. It seems like one of those filler cards. However, if you actually look at it in practice, I believe it has a bit more impact than that, having the opportunity to steal up to 2 bunnies along with the 2 Underground Stations. Unless, of course, there's a law enforcement bunny, and then that ruins everything. As they tend to. Anything else we want to say on this card?
No, I'm good.
Okay. That was a fairly simple one. Moving on, this one's pretty exciting. It's a run card, non-aggressive, weakest link. It says may be used by the player with the least number of bunnies and carrots combined to take bunnies, carrots, or a combination of both until he has 1 more than the player with the next least amount. So if you have the least bunnies and carrots combined, then you will get to steal bunnies and carrots of your choice until you have one more than the second least. At that point, you would be the second least, of course. What are your thoughts, Joe?
I am a big fan of catch-up cards. I mean, and especially because this is not an aggressive card, I think this is awesome. There's nothing worse than like hour 3 of your game when you're playing all day long and you're sitting there with no bunnies and like 1 carrot. To pull something like this at that point, or better yet, if you're going for the passivity, maybe to give this to somebody in that situation. Uh, yeah, I think this card has a lot of potential. I'm a big fan to see this used in our games.
Very exciting. What do you think, Mikey?
Yeah, this is really neat. I can think of some situations in which I would have liked to have had this. I think it would in a two-player game where where you are being dominated and like the person has maybe 7 bunnies and depending on how many what set you're playing, a large amount of carrots. That would be you could potentially end and win the game, which would be pretty great.
Feels bad
Yeah,
for the other player.
it feels bad for the other player. It's kind of like the time where you bought all but 1 carrot with all of your dollar, and then I played. I was it carrot? No,
Wheels
Real
fresh and
Crescent
center.
City. Yeah, that was fun. So it'd be kind of like one of those. Yeah, in a two-player game, this would be awesome.
Awesome was not the word I was going to use. I was going to say this would be toxic. Although I can say that I've played more two-player games than Mikey. I would often play two-player games with Chris, and Atlas Shrugged was the win condition in any of those games because all of a sudden it's like, hey, look, you're losing, and now you're purposefully losing. And all of a sudden, oh, you're rolling 8 dice, and all you need is for 2 of them to be the same, and you should swap places? Seems good. This is similar, except, of course, there's no dice roll, so that's exciting. And let's see, what else is different? And, of course, you're only stealing, in a 2-player game, you'd only be stealing half. But that's misleading to say so because you're obviously stealing the better half. If your opponent has a Halo Bunny, an extra Super Pink, and the holographic, and all those fun guys, and a few standard bunnies, you should steal all the big fancy bunnies and then leave them with nothing. Or even better, if they are that far ahead, where since it's bunnies and carrots combined, you could steal all the bunnies first and then steal carrots. So all of a sudden you completely mass steal all of your opponent's bunnies. And at that point, their carrots perhaps don't matter. Maybe you save this for the last turn, and then you mass steal all your opponent's bunnies on the last turn, and then buy the last remaining carrot, and that's a 2-player game for you.
I have a question though.
Yes.
I'm reading this as if you're taking carrots and bunnies from the draw pile. But are we taking it from the draw pile or from our opponents?
I presumed opponents, but if it could be possible. We'll need to see the bunny bits.
Because it doesn't specify opponents.
True. Bunnies would assume, well, not necessarily, because we could be taking bunnies from the disco pile and carrots from Kabbalah's. If so, I think this card is actually scarier, because if your opponent has, let's say, a 54 carrot game, let's assume 2-player again, just for the extreme example. Your opponent has 22 carrot, or let's see, yeah. Quick math. No. 27 carrots. Your opponent has 27 carrots. You have no carrots and no bunnies. Then all of a sudden, you're only halfway done with the game, but you play Weakest Link and the game is over. Because then you get to choose 27 carrots and you get to resurrect bunnies. I think because of that, the safest assumption, at least in terms of balance, if we can make assumptions based on balance, that's a bit biased, would be to steal.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. If and not to get too picky on the wording of the card, but if I, spoiler alert, jump ahead to Double Decker Bus, and that one is choose a carrot, whereas this one is take bunnies or carrots. So to me, the take versus choose very strongly makes it seem like it's from other players.
Yeah, that is also a safe assumption wording wise. Although the counter argument, it's a weak counter argument, but the wording on a Kinder Bunnies card would be take a carrot for choosing carrots.
Though
But
arguing about the rules is half the fun of Killer Bunnies.
true, especially when you know you're right. That's always fun. But I do believe that it is safe to assume that this is stealing carrots and bunnies, although I expect it to be clarified in the bunny bits.
I'm excited to see the bunny bits because I want to be right, and then I'm going to tell people about it on the podcast.
Here we go. Okay. So yes, something else I want to say about this card is I think Joe briefly mentioned it. What does this card creates an opportunity for a smooth transition from pure passive to pure aggressive? You're playing pure passive most of the game and you have very few bunnies and carrots, and then you play weakest link, and then you steal all the highest value bunnies from the opponent who's winning, and maybe even makes
And
you
that's
look.
a good point. You can't target whoever's winning with this card. You have to target whoever is the worst next to you.
Well,
Right?
I believe you can take them from anywhere, but you only can increase up to the next level.
Oh, so you could take them. So you could take them from the player in first
Yeah,
place.
strategically, you
Okay.
usually would take them from the player in first place or second place because
Okay.
they're presumably going to have the best things to steal, and it'll allow you to steal more things. You wouldn't want to steal from the person in second to least place.
No, I wouldn't think you would want to. I was making the assumption.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see how you read that, but I believe you can steal from anyone based on this wording.
Gotcha. That makes more sense, actually. Yeah.
There you go. We have a potential opportunity where you could transition from pure passive to pure economic aggressive, in theory, or at the
Then
very
your
least, aggressive neutral, where
Your
What are you saying, Mikey?
your passivity would lose credibility then. If
Very
you
true.
did that.
It might, probably depending on exactly how much you get out of the deal and how aggressive the person in first has been. I bet if you're facing a pure aggressive player who has this extra super pink bunny and all of these carrots, 10 more carrots than the person next, I bet people would actually be pretty happy with you if you stole stuff from them.
If you
But
wanted to
now
maintain, though, your pure passivity,
Yep.
you could trade this to a player, right? Be like, hey, give me 2 carrots. I'll give you this card. This would let you steal up to 5 carrots. I don't know if that's math, but you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That there's potential there as well, trading this card away because it is very high value to a person who's behind, and being nice to players who are behind is seen as passive.
But I'm saying, if you're close, trade it to somebody putting them in last place so they can use this card.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
That's also an opportunity. Yeah, trade for all of their carrots so that they can steal more carrots from the other player.
Oh, there you go. Just so we can
Oh,
hurt
that'll be really toxic in a 3-player game. I can see it now.
just so we can steal carrots from Jeff.
Yeah, just like 3-player game. Oh, if you trade me all of your carrots and bunnies, and then you can play this, and then you can steal everything from this player, and then all of a sudden it's the 2 of us that are ahead, and you went from 2 passive players to 2 aggressive players, and the aggressive player all of a sudden has nothing. And then you have the unbeatable alliance of two players that are ahead versus one, which is an excellent demonstration why the game isn't necessarily balanced at 3. I always recommend 4 to 6.
Oh, for sure.
Now, in like a situation that you and Frank and I had, where 3 people were playing some form of passive, like if you were to play that card with 3 passive players, that's when I was thinking, you would lose credibility because you were worried, you
Very
couldn't
true.
become aggressive because otherwise nobody would take your aggressive passives um, playing seriously anymore.
Yeah, very true. In a group that's entirely passive, which I would previously think to be the exception, but has actually become the meta has shifted in our at tabletop club and such, where everyone is actually playing somewhat passive. In that sort of group, I think this card is very dangerous to attempt to use optimally, where you would
Yep.
get too far ahead where you really couldn't justify it and remain passive. Unless, of course, you decided to, after stealing everything, trade it all away and divide it evenly among the players so that it's, kind of like a Robin Hood situation.
Huh.
That would be probably a common passive neutral philosophy, where the passive neutral player will often be the equalizer between to make sure that no one player gets too far ahead. I think this is a very strong card for that passive neutral strategy because then they can steal all of the triplets and such from the aggressive player and divide them out between the other players, and they'll have many friends.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll probably even trade them for some value back. They're not necessarily going to give everything away, but for some cheap price, probably.
Yep.
Maybe $3 for a bunny triplet is something I would experiment with, and then we'll go from there and see how well that works out in a passive neutral context. So a very exciting card all around, and non-aggressive. I was making comparisons to Atlas Shrugged in a 2-player scenario. Well, Atlas Shrugged is an aggressive card. This card has no die roll and is non-aggressive. That's a little bit scary. Anything else we want to say on this card before we move on?
That was fun.
Okay.
Just that.
Was that the weakest link
I
reference?
hope that came through clearly. You are the
I
weakest
think I
link
heard
guy.
it. Yeah, you
And
are
if
the
not, I
weakest link.
apologize for ruining this episode.
No, you're
Oh.
good. I think I got it. Okay. Oh, hold on. Make sure. Okay. Gotta make sure I don't mess things up. Next card here. Well, I'm really excited about this one. It's a special card. Fun fact: this is actually the only special card in all of London. There are a few very specials that we'll get to. But we have a special card called Double Decker Bus. It has the red circle signifying that you need to keep a bunny in play to keep it. And the text reads, the player with this card saved may choose a carrot every time that he rolls doubles on any combination of dice. If at any time the player has no bunnies in the bunny circle, then Double Decker Bus is discarded. What are your thoughts, Mikey?
Well, in the episode where we had just the preview that we stole off of Amazon, I had mentioned that out of all those, that was my favorite card. I still think this is such a cool card. I mean, trying to think of a situation in which. Oh, okay. So, I was thinking if in a situation where you had Ice 9, but you could only use it once, but you would be guaranteed at least at one point to get doubles. Um, but yeah, this is a cool card. You just got to make sure you have bunnies, and then every time that you roll, more than 2 die or more than 1 die, then you have a 1 out of 12 chance that you can get a carrot. I don't know. I just think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I was also considering Ice 9. If you take a card that rolls 8 dice, and Ice 9 it, presumably it'd be a card you'd want to Ice 9 anyways, something like Super Supply Surprise, then you would get 4 doubles of 9, so presumably you'd get 4 carrots in that situation. Which that's a pretty big boost out of one card. Choose 4 carrots. That would be an amazing card to draw. Here we have it on special, where if it's not contested, it could happen. You could get quite a few carrots from it. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah. So now I'm wondering. Now we're talking about Ice 9. I had a thought about this originally, but now I'm want to go down this Ice 9 rabbit hole. So if I was saying, let's say I roll 5 dice and all of them are 9s, how many doubles would that be? Do we get to count each die multiple times in each double?
We don't know for sure, but the closest thing to mechanical consistency we have, I believe, is bunny bowling, which of course you have to roll, you're taking each pair of dice to add up to 10, or each 10. It's a very similar mechanic to rolling doubles, and in that case you can't count dice multiple times, so it's safe to assume the same here. But
Okay.
Presumably, again with that scenario, presumably if you get multiple doubles, if you get 4 9s, then you would get multiple carrots.
That makes sense. Anyway, so the original thought I had on this card, thank you for answering the question, but original thought I had on this card, so I think as we approach, 80 carrots, we're going to start seeing more and more of these types of cards, and I want to coin a new phrase to add to the Bunny Batter Catechism, right? Carrot acceleration, right? I don't know if you call it a card type or a strategy, but a focus of just accelerating economic aggression to get as many carrots as fast as possible. And I think this is a card that fits perfectly with that philosophy.
I like it. It reminds me to continue working on the official Bunny Banter Catechism, and now that you mentioned it, we should put these terminologies into that. I think that's a great idea. Yes, carrot acceleration. I like it. Yeah. 80 carrots is coming up.
Yeah, so we're gonna need a way to drawing 1 to 2 at a time. That's not gonna cut it. Not when you're playing with 80 carrots.
Very true. As of London Booster, we will have 58 carrots will be the official total, and we have confirmed to be getting more carrots in the future. There is a number that Mikey and I know, but it's not public information as to the quote-unquote final total. But yes, I would definitely, knowing that final total, I would definitely like more carrot acceleration cards to be printed. This one, in certain groups, economic aggression isn't necessarily enough to be targeted over.
Yeah.
When talking about aggressive strategies and who to target, the very common things to look at are the amount of bunnies they have in play, how many cards they're playing per turn, how much dollar they're generating per turn, that kind of thing, or how many save specials they have, potential dollar generation. Carrot count isn't always taken into consideration compared to everything else. If I have 15 carrots and my opponent has a pink gleeful bunny and 9 carrots, they're probably going to be more likely to be targeted, just because psychologically players are more likely to target that pink gleeful bunny because they think to themselves, oh, it's a huge threat. It's a bunny, so it's allowing them to play more cards, and it's generating dollar per turn. Pink bunnies are huge threats. All of that sort of philosophy where that kind of economic aggression of pink and red bunnies is a very common target. Another type of aggression that's a very common target is just in retaliation to any aggressive plays on another player, they are likely to retaliate. So if you can get away with not being very targeted aggressive, shall we say, where you're directly attacking other players' bunnies and such on a large scale, if you can avoid that type of scenario, I think this card could have large potential in certain groups, where it will remain uncontested.
And maybe this would fit perfect with a passive strategy, like pure passive of, hey, leave my bunnies alive. Somebody gets a carrot every time I roll doubles. Not going to be me. I'm handing it out.
Very true.
Mm.
I'm glad that you mentioned the pure passive because there's variants of all the categories, of course. Clarissa, who's a notorious pure passive player in our group, although she doesn't play too often, she would very easily get away with having this without actually giving away the carrots. Because
Mhm.
she avoids those directed aggressive plays and sometimes uses economic aggressive plays instead, and players don't necessarily prioritize that when there's other aggressive players in the game. So the pure passive definitely can get away with it in certain contexts like that, and like you mentioned, where if someone does try to contest it, perhaps you offer to give them the next so many carrots for them to not try to remove it.
Yeah, I mean, after all, this only works if your bunnies are alive. So if you kill my bunnies, neither of us get anything.
Yeah, exactly. So if someone threatens to kill your double-decker bus, then you're just like, well, if you don't do that, and we form a non-aggression pact, which is also non-aggression pacts is another one of the aggressive strategies that has been proven to work well. Uh, if you form a non-aggression pact like that, then all of a sudden you have this uncontested and you can just get away with whatever you want pretty much. That's pretty scary, but I like these types of cards. We've seen with the recent expansions being released, we have seen quite a few carrot acceleration cards. I love that new term. Where you had the metals, coins, and karma booster that boosted the economy so much, and the choose a carrot zodiac and creature feature that had the potential to choose up to 24 carrots. We got just recently in pumpkin spice, I believe we had choose a carrot low roll, which is rolls I believe it's 3 or 4 dice. Then you get the lowest rolls, the amount of carrots you choose. A minimum of one, but you could get theoretically up to 12 carrots. You're not going to, of course, but you get a pretty good average amount of carrots from that as well. So we have been seeing quite a few carrot acceleration cards. I always like to see more printed, just to keep that game length around that. Game length for our groups tend to be around 3 to 4 hours. I like keeping it around that point.
Yeah, I know when if I plan ahead and I get the Killer Bunnies group, I have no problem playing a 4-hour game, sometimes 4 plus, depending how mean we are to each other. But for newbies, yeah, there's no way you're dragging them out for a 4-hour game. It's just not happening.
For sure, yeah. And something to note with that is that if anyone listening is struggling with game length, I think the best thing I can recommend is to divide carrots out at the start. That is actually within the rules of starter sets. It recommends in the game length section of the Bunny Bits, it recommends to divide a set amount of carrots out at the start. So if you want to play like for 1 to 2 hours, maybe you divide out 30 of the carrots out of 54 right at the start, and it basically stimulates the economy. You got a lot of carrot acceleration right at the start. Or
Yeah.
the alternative, which is technically a house rule that the Discord and I have worked on. That is, if you have a set amount of time that you have dedicated to play, at the end of that time, if you still have carrots remaining, just divide out the remaining carrots, and then
Oh.
and then
Oh.
it's a last resort type thing. Of course, the former option of dividing carrots out the start is strictly better because then there's plenty of opportunities for those carrots to move around throughout the game by trading and stealing. Dividing carrots out the end kind of ruins the purpose, but it is a last resort.
Can I give you our house rule on that situation? I know we're
Sure,
way off topic. Or
go
should we
ahead.
stay on topic? You tell
No,
me.
go ahead.
Okay, so when we run into that where it's like, hey, our hour's up, we gotta go, we just start flipping over the small carrot cards. First one that somebody owns, that one is the winner.
That is also a way I've seen it done, and that also works. I'm going to share one more way. Uh, this way is similar to the previous one where we distribute the last remaining carrots. However, we do it so mechanically consistent with Tivitellos, which is the card from Pumpkin Spice that ends the game early under certain circumstances. And in that scenario, the market is treated as a player without a bunny. So all of the market's carrots go to the player with the most dollar. However, I recommend not to use that one unless you agree to it at the start of the game, because it will drastically influence how players use their dollar. Because it's very important to have the most dollar in that scenario.
Oh, I could see that as your time limit's creeping up. Do I want to buy one carrot or do I want to hold out and try to get all the
Exactly.
carrots?
Yeah, that ruling is a bit more disruptive in terms of dollar management strategies. The other one of dividing the carrots equally is disruptive in terms of carrot management strategies, more or less. And the former, dividing carrots at the start, is probably the best way to do it. Surprise, surprise, the official rules are the best way to do it.
What?
Even if I try to make these very sophisticated house rules that are planned very carefully, the official way is still better. Funny how that works. Anything else we want to say on Double Decker Bus before we move on to the next card here?
No?
No.
Okay. So next card here, Canary Wharf. We've actually already discussed this card on the I believe it was episode 7 with Jonathan and Jeff. But since we were discussing the other very specialist here, I thought I'd throw it in to briefly mention anything about it. So we have a very special. It's aggressive, and it says may be used once by a player to eliminate either Daleks, Dodgy Bangers, Soggy Bottom, or Tipsy Phone Boxes. May be used anytime. So what are your thoughts, Joe?
I mean, so mechanically, it's the usefulness depends on how many cards you're playing with, right? If you're playing like Conquest Forward, it's pretty useful. If you're playing with the whole set, not as much. That's all you really is to say about the mechanics. The art, and I know Jeff mentioned this on his podcast, or when he was on your podcast, he was the guest. Now that I see it, I 100% agree. Hats off to Jonathan. This is an awesome picture. It looks like something that happened on the holodeck on an episode of Star Trek.
Ha!
Oh yeah, the arts is definitely where this card shines. As we mentioned in the previous episode, the things it eliminates here happen to be the 4 weapons that are in London Booster, which are all relatively high level. So if you get to play it, it's great. Eliminating a level 19 weapon, it's pretty good. You get to save a bunny. You can consider it worth $10. You basically drew $10 if you want to think about it that way. But in most cases, in full set, you're probably not going to get to play it. At that point, players will follow different philosophies. They'll either run it through and save it and then completely forget about it in most cases, or since it's a very special card, you could just discard it directly from your hand for free and just draw a new card. There's arguments that go both ways, of course. Depending on the situation, depending on what strategies I'm playing, I might go with either. Anything you want to say, Mikey, before we move on?
I just think it's nice that it's a very special and it's not or just a run card because yeah, this is if you're playing full set, you don't want to just hold this in your hand with the hopes that maybe somebody will play one of those cards on you so you can get rid of it. At least you can I would probably save it. I know it kind of, that that it would take some time to run it through, but yeah, I would probably just save it. Um, just in case. But yeah, I like that it's very special. And the artwork, like you said, cool. I know Jeff raves about this picture. I think every time we've spoken to him about this card, he always talks about the artwork. So
Oh yeah, Jeff's favorite card from the set, fun fact. Although Jeff is biased towards the artwork, when we asked him what his favorite card total was for that giveaway that nobody won, it was Athena, which is mechanically a somewhat irrelevant card, but the artwork is what he likes the most. in several cases. Yeah, this is one of those cards where if I'm trying to min-max, I'll probably try to keep it in my hand as long as possible and then end up never using
Yeah.
it. So when I actually do get to use it, that will be a fun day. It's kind of like actually getting to use Bug Off or Noah's Flood in full set. Once it's actually relevant, it's like, yes, check it off the bucket list. Play Noah's Flood in full set.
Nice.
Feels good. Okay. Moving on to the next card here. Another very special. Let's see if I can pronounce this correctly. Trafalgar Square? Something like that. It's aggressive. It says, may be used once by a player to remove 3 bunnies on 3 Underground Station cards and to place them anywhere in the bunny circle at the end of any player's turn that rolls a 1, 4, 9 on any combination of dice. May be used at any time. So that is a bit of a mouthful, but let me try to explain it. So if any player, they're playing their cards, maybe they play Supply Surprise, and they happen to roll a 1, 4, 9 on the dice. At that point, you can play this very special and steal 3, reposition. You don't necessarily have to steal them for yourself. Reposition any 3 bunnies on Underground Stations. What are your thoughts, Mikey?
Okay. First of all, I want to know what the content has to do with Trafalgar, that square. Um, that's I know like a lot of times they like to relate it to things, but I don't know what this has to do with it. I'm sure we could ask Jeff and he would tell us, or Jonathan. Anyway, this is kind of neat and kind of obscure, especially since it's a somewhat rare situation, I think, that you would be able to actually use this. I mean, I'm sure there are many times when you roll 1, 4, 9 when you're rolling multiple die, but yeah, it's kind of cool that you're able to take the bunnies from the Bunderground station, which are constantly moving around, well, somewhat constantly moving around. And from what I understand of this, you can just put them in um, your, why can't I think of what it's called? You can claim them as your own, and I wonder if the oyster crackers go away. They probably do.
That is the question here. It doesn't say for sure, but it's notably interesting that it's notable that you are removing them from the Underground stations. You're not moving them to your own Underground stations. You are placing them back in the bunny circle. So it is possible that in the bunny bits it clarifies that the oyster crackers are removed. Perhaps not. We don't know for sure yet. I'm going to assume not. Just because that's the safest assumption if we haven't seen the bunny bits yet. And also there's bunnies that have the oyster crackers by default, such as day trippers. So for obvious reasons you couldn't remove the oyster crackers from them.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Joe?
The biggest thing I get from this one is it's gonna be hard to get a bunny out of a underground station. If this is the criteria to do it, it'll make it rewarding when you're able to. But yeah, so if when a bunny goes in, you can pretty much consider that a one-way trip, as far as it seems like anyway.
Well, until it gets moved to another underground station, of course, because they will. Bunnies with oyster crackers are relatively consistently moving with the roll of the red die, because every time the red die is rolled, the player with that numbered underground station can reposition a bunny with an oyster cracker, which is probably already in a underground station, and usually steal it from themselves. Um, so they are moving. That's something very important to note. This card seems very high impact. Stealing 3 bunnies on a very special card. That's pretty high tempo. all things considered. And these are probably high value bunnies because again, the oyster crackers are likely to be placed on high value bunny just by philosophy. However, since we can presume that they still have the oyster crackers since we don't know for sure, they are quite likely to be stolen back at some point while they're still alive. Because every time that red die is rolled, there is potential. It'll be interesting to see how often this card is actually relevant. Because with various specials, I mentioned it with the previous one, you always have to ask yourself, am I actually keeping this card? Or do I just want to discard it and cycle it? Drawing a card is good. Drawing cards gets you Jala. That's a good thing. Do I actually want to quote unquote waste a turn to save this? Or do I want to quote unquote limit my options by keeping this in my hand for the rest of eternity until it actually becomes relevant? Because I think this is the first instance, correct me if you can think of any exception, the first instance where a very special card has the condition of your opponent rolling something specific. I can think of one instance that's close, and that is the card that steals the rewards from Carrot Top Casino. So they would have to successfully get Carrot Top Casino. This is a more general case where they have to get a 1-4-9.
Yeah, I can't think of anything.
Although also notable, it says at the end of any player's turn, not at the end of any opponent's turn. So you could also use this on your own turn.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something important to remember. So I think the 1-4-9 condition will be relatively easy to accomplish. The difficult thing to accomplish, at least with the release of London, in the future it might become easier, will be for there to be 3 bunnies in Underground stations. Because London only has 3 oyster crackers and day trippers, so that's 4 potential bunnies throughout the whole full set that could be in Underground stations. And once they die, they're dead and the oyster crackers aren't coming back. Day trippers might come back, but I'd be surprised if you could actually get the full value out of this card and steal 3 bunnies. I think in most cases, if you're playing this, you're only getting 1, maybe 2. There's background noises in my hallway, but I don't think it's picking up on my microphone, so we're good.
Sounds like people are dying or getting in fights or something. I don't know.
I think so. Hopefully it's not picking up too much. But anyways, what was I saying? Oh yeah. So this card, it'll be interesting to see how relevant it is. Maybe I can make a comparison to something as simple as the Magic Fountain. How often with the Magic Fountain do you get 2 bunnies out of the deal? Not very often. 3 bunnies even rare. When we're talking 5 bunnies, that's probably a nice 9 situation. You're not getting that lucky. In this case, luck isn't a determining factor, except for luck of the draw, of course. But getting into the scenario where you actually have 3 bunnies in Underground stations, I predict that'll be rare, but we'll see how relevant it is in practice. Anything else we want to say on this card before moving on?
No, sir.
Okay. We have 2 more cards to go over because I missed the first one. So the final very special card, another aggressive very special, Tube Delay. This one's kind of interesting. It says may be used once by a player to delay one of his bunnies with an oyster cracker from moving to a Underground station until the end of his next turn. May be used at any time. So if someone gets the condition to steal a bunny with an oyster cracker, the red die was rolled and the correct number is rolled for the proper Underground station, all of a sudden you have this very special card that can delay that move by a turn. So maybe you have a really crucial turn coming up and you really need this bunny to stick around for 1 more turn. So you play Tube Delay and you prevent the bunny from being stolen for that round, more or less. What are your thoughts, Joe?
I already tell you how I'm going to use this card. I'm going to save it through the entire game, too afraid to run it in my hand for the exact moment I absolutely need it, and then never play it.
Same goes for me, honestly.
That's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, this one, I'd be more prone to discard, I believe.
Actually, can I ask you a clarifying question on that? I already admitted you know the rules of this game better than I do. Can you really just throw a very special directly into the discard pile?
You can, because you could play a very special directly from your hand without it costing a turn. So therefore, it's just like for every opportunity you have it to play a card, you may also discard the card instead. Therefore, you can discard the very special
And that
directly
makes
from the hand.
perfect sense, and I never put that together.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you wouldn't think of it unless you're actually. It's an unorthodox strategy, more or less. You know, you're thinking, why would I waste a card? But in reality, you're doing so to draw a card because drawing cards is good, and that's
Yeah.
not something you would always think of right away if you're not thinking deeper into the strategy of the game. You know,
I could see it being like a high aggression kind of thing. Like, these cards aren't helping me blow anyone up right now, so I need new cards.
for sure, yeah, it's a very common strategy among aggressive and aggressive neutral players to be discarding very specials very liberally to search for higher value cards. Even if it's something that's relatively medium value, something like Guardian Angle, you're going to play it at some point, presumably, and it might be really relevant at some point, presumably, but they will often discard even very specials of that strength in order to just cycle more, to draw more Dala and draw different options, rather than running those cards through and quote unquote wasting a turn to save a very special.
Yeah. Huh. Cool.
Yeah, so that's an interesting mechanic. This card I would be quite prone to just immediately discard, at least with the release of London, since it has been confirmed that we are getting more bunnies that come with oyster crackers, sort of like Day Trippers does. Perhaps it'll be more relevant once those bunnies come out, whenever that would happen to be. But currently we just have the 3 oyster crackers and Day Trippers. And the chances of you getting uh, one of those oyster crackers played on you, first of all, it's not so much that you draw it yourself, it's more likely that your opponent's going to play it on you. Or if you have Day Trippers and he's rotating anyways, so who cares if he's stolen? Uh, so we could actually leave Day Trippers out of that equation pretty much. We can just leave the 3 oyster crackers. A 3-card relevance this card has.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's relatively low value. What do you think, Mikey?
I don't know. I mean, I think it could be useful with day trippers, um, especially if, say, day trippers or any of those bunnies with the oyster crackers is your only bunny, and perhaps you have some plan or something that you're going to do that's going to get you more bunnies or more carrots or more. You have a plan, and you just need that one more turn, and this person, and then somebody rolls whatever you roll that causes everything to move. And it's on the red die, isn't it?
Yep.
I think it is. Okay. So somebody rolls that, everything moves, but you're like, you have this plan, it's gonna work out, but you just need that one more turn. Having this very special there could potentially save you. So I don't know. I mean, it's not useful in a majority of situations. However, that may be, like Joe was saying, that one perfect situation you're waiting for and then you never end up using it. Well, maybe that's the time that you're going to use it. I would save it, but that's kind of my general philosophy. Save everything in case you need it. I guess that could be called a special hoarder.
Yeah,
I
there
hoard
are
the
there are
special.
benefits to that strategy, and there are of course
Yeah.
punishments as well. Things like
Yeah.
the church bunny and cards like that, where removing or stealing mass amounts of save specials is dangerous. But also, something that really synergizes with that strategy is a card I haven't seen play that often because it's in Conquest Violet, and that is what's it called? I'll think of it. It's the card that anytime a 4 is rolled on the black die. Um, Talos 4. That's the special card that requires a bunny. And every while you have it saved, every time a 4 is rolled on the black die, you can swap specials with someone. So if you had the Kinder Bunnies choose one cabbage card, and someone else had white stuff, a really impactful special, you could swap those.
Yep.
That's pretty exciting. I always get really excited with those types of cards like Talos 4, where there is this high potential, but it's not high enough potential where you're necessarily going to get targeted for it. It's more
Yeah.
like, oh, every time this happens, I get to do something really cool. You know, underground stations are kind of the same way. You're not necessarily going to be targeted because you have a large amount of underground stations, but when they do work, it's high value. So saving the very specials as opposed to discarding them if they're low value has its benefits, and I might consider it with certain strategies. Tube delay, it might be relevant. You know, having that one extra turn for the bunny, if you time it correctly, that's pretty good. Um, Especially if it's a high value bunny like the pink lethal. You know, that's pretty good as well. Maybe I thought of something. I thought of a synergy. Maybe this card is relevant. Maybe what you do is the bunny is about to be stolen. You play Tube Delay, and then until the end of your next turn, that is still your bunny. So what you do is you play all of your Carrot Top Royale type cards and gamble that bunny's life away, because even if it dies, you're going to lose it anyways.
Oh.
And if it succeeds, then you got all of the benefits without much risk.
There
So
you
maybe
go.
it has that sort of philosophy behind it, where you could treat it as though the bunny, you know, it's a very common strategy to do with bunnies that are starving to death, and you have no way of feeding it, so you just gamble its life away and it's going to die anyways. Or same with like poverty poker. This would be a good enabler for poverty poker. All of a sudden you delay the bunny, you delay the bunny being stolen, you poverty poker it away, and if you win poverty poker, great. If you lose poverty poker, you're going to lose that bunny anyways. So it has some pretty cool synergies. These types of cards tend to have those really cool synergies with some medium to higher value cards to just make those cards shine even more. Just by doing these minor little effects. But in most cases, like Joe said, I do expect this to be somewhat meaningless. So maybe it's worth considering to discard.
So actually, now that we're talking about this a bit, I just thought of an amazing opportunity for this card, right? So we already talked about, or you guys talked about in a previous episode, using Mad Bunny Disease, right? And then switching a bunny on the underground. This is an opportunity where you could say, no, man, I'm going to take one for the team. I'm going to contain this bunny right here on my bunnies. You know, ultimate passivity move.
There you go. That is a very good passive play, but it does beg the question, unfortunately, if you're playing passive, why do you have Mad Bunny Disease on you?
Who knows? Who knows?
Also, something to note, I thought of for a second, oh, maybe I can delay someone else's bunny, but no, it does say delay one of his bunnies with an oyster cracker from moving. So the counter scenario there where someone else has Mad Bunny Disease and they're about to move, you couldn't use the tube delay to delay that. It has to be one of your own bunnies. But yeah, there is a passive potential there, and the passive strategy does tend to like to pass on turns, so saving the very special is a good thing in the passive strategy. So there is potential there if the passive player happens to get Mad Bunny Disease. By whatever methods, with underground stations it probably becomes more common that the passive player would, then all of a sudden you have that way to delay by a turn and prevent it from spreading further.
Also, when you're talking about the Mad Bunny disease, I thought of a way if you just want to go full on aggressive, right? So what you want to do is stockpile however many red pawns you can, and then play 1943, which allows you 3 rerolls built in, and then however many rerolls from your red pawns, and then just start flinging that bunny all over the underground.
Well, hold on. Let me think about that for a second. I believe with how rerolls work, I think it would only be the final roll that would count.
Oh, it would.
I believe that's the case. I could be wrong on that, but it does make the most sense that since you're throwing away the previous roll more or less with the reroll mechanic, that it's only the roll you actually take.
And I guess that would be consistent, but that's not fun.
Yeah. But even if it was the case that the rerolls would work, unfortunately for that strategy to work, the opponents would likely have to willingly take the bunny with the oyster cracker with Mad Bunny disease, because it's the opponent who has the underground station that gets to choose which bunny to move, not the opponent who rolls the die.
Oh.
So if I have underground station number 7 and my opponent rolls a 7, I get to choose to move. Now, we haven't read the blankets yet. That could be a must, not a may. So it might not be optional.
Gotcha.
We don't know yet, but thematically speaking, it would make sense if it was optional.
You're talking about it's if somebody rolls a 7 and you have underground station 7, that it's optional for them to move?
It's optional for them to steal, I believe. That's why I'm predicting. We don't know yet. It might be forced.
Oh, so steal. I'm confused.
A bunny with an oyster cracker. If you have
Okay.
underground station 7 and a 7 is rolled,
Mhm.
you get to move a bunny with an oyster cracker to that underground station. It is now yours.
Okay.
We don't know yet if that is optional or if that is mandatory. If it's
Ah.
mandatory, the Mad Bunny disease strategy works. And all of a sudden having underground stations is a bad thing. If it's optional, they'd have to consent to taking the Mad Bunny disease bunny. Which then they're really mad. Or they weren't paying attention. They're like, oh yes, I get to steal a bunny. Oh. 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 It's like if you put a Mad Bunny disease bunny in poverty poker and your opponents don't realize them, they actually try to get the correct roll, using their reroll cards and all that fun stuff. And it's like, oh, by the way, that bunny had Mad Bunny disease. All your bunnies are infected now. Feels bad.
You could go play it on yourself. Like, yeah, fine, take a bunny. Boom. Which one you want?
That's right. There we go.
Yeah.
Here we go. Here's the idea. Crazy idea. Use Mad Bunny disease defensively so that they don't want to steal your oyster crackers.
Hey, are we saying Mad Bunny disease fits into the pure passive meta?
Yes, because you make yourself lose your carrots. Call up Frank right now. We found his new strategy. He played this 2-player Jarnac in the most passive way possible. Surely he can make this work where you play the Mad Bunny disease on yourself to make sure that you have no carrots. And nobody wants to kill your bunnies. So you can just cycle and draw Kabbalah Dala because people aren't likely to target you because you're Kabbalah Dala. And then once it becomes relevant, then you can finally buy the amount of carrots you have saved up.
Or somebody can steal the money.
No,
With
that won't
bunny
happen.
and
You're playing
clock.
passive. They wouldn't do that. Otherwise, bad things would happen to them.
That's what happened to me. Frank. Frank played Bonnie and Clyde, stole all my money. I only put 120.
I persuaded him to do so. That was the plan that game. So, Joe, I don't know if we mentioned that this in a previous Bunny Band, so I'll tell the story here. We had a game where the three of us played passive, and before that game, I owed Mikey. How much dollar did I owe you? 140, I believe. No, 120. 120.
Yeah.
I owed Mikey $120 debt from a previous trade.
Holy
long,
cow.
long story on why that was, but it was strategic because the variant strategy I was playing, Dala, was actually a liability. So my entire plan that game was to give Mikey so much Dala and he had already traded for it, so he had to accept it, of course, so that he would have the most dollar and would be the obvious target. And even though all three of us played pure passive essentially, Frank eventually justified it with a little bit persuasion to play Bunny and Clyde and steal all of Mikey's dollar, which was over 150.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
So that was a fun game. I don't know where I was going with that. Oh yeah, Mad Bunny Disease, passive play. There we go. It's determined. We need Frank to test it right now. Okay. Anything else we want to say on Tube Delay before we move on to the final card here, which was supposed to be the first card? Okay. Here we have a run card. Aggressive, rolls the red die. Notable that rolls the red die, of course, because it's underground stations. Station Snatch is what it's called. May be used once by a player to roll the die and to snatch any one underground station with the same number rolled. If the underground station has had a bunny, then it will remain with the underground station in its new position. So this is actually the example of stealing a underground station, mechanically, consistency-wise, keeps the bunny that was inside it. So here we have very kind of like the carrot thief of underground stations. Here we have station snatch or pawn thief or all of those types of cards. We have another quote unquote some would consider a filler card, but I think it's more impactful than that. What do you think, Mikey?
I am wondering. Okay, so if with no, wait, that's a different card I'm thinking of. So if you roll this die and say you roll a 7, and station number 7 is not out, then you're just out of luck,
Pretty much.
that's kind of unfortunate. So this is one of those cards, what we were talking about earlier with some of the other ones, just like the previous one, the whatever it was called. I don't even remember what the last card was called. Anyway, it was called Tube Delay. There we go. Since this is just one expansion or booster set, and if you're playing in full set, this is kind of an irrelevant card because there are so few Bunderground stations. How many people are actually going to have a Bunderground station? Maybe one person has a Bunderground station, and you roll a die, and you end up not getting it because, you have 12 options, or you have numbers, and the one Underground station that's out is not selected. So yeah, I think it's kind of an irrelevant card. I mean, it's kind of cool if you happen to get it. And this one, it's not a very special, so you can't just discard out of your hand, so you have to run it through. And so then you have timing. Yeah, I'm not a giant fan of this card, but it could be useful in a very limited situation.
Yeah, it kind of has the same problem as Zodiac Thief in that sense, where if the Zodiac card hadn't been drawn yet, in Zodiac Thief you actually get two options, then you're out of luck, you don't get it. Station Snatch has that similar problem where if that Underground station hadn't been drawn, you're not going to get it. Counter argument to that is, unlike Zodiac Thief, which rolls the Zodiac die, which there are very few opportunities to reroll, the red die has vastly more opportunities to be able to reroll it, especially with the predicted increase in popularity of the red pawn with the underground stations. So perhaps, even if there's only 2 or 3 underground stations in play, you will likely have that opportunity for reroll. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, and I hate to say, I don't see it being incredibly useful, especially that it's a run card. You kind of have to plan ahead a little bit to do it. That being said, I mean, I think it's fine. You know, not every card has to be game shattering. I think this is a fine card. It meshes well with the new mechanics in the London booster. Um, yeah, I guess it's nothing exciting, but I think it's for what it is. It's fine.
Yeah, very true. Uh, I always think Jeff does an excellent job with game balance. He has that math background that he is able to do so very well. So this is, relatively speaking, lower value card within the context of full set. It's no Ice 9, and it's not even as high value as something like Carrot Thief, and Carrot Thief is relatively low value. Carrot Thief has the guaranteed opportunity to steal carrot. This one, maybe. It's very situational. But it is, with the different strategies, low value cards are very crucial to the passive strategy, at least most variants of the passive strategy. Because any high value card, like the pink Lethal Bunny, is strictly speaking unplayable for that strategy. If they ever play that pink lethal, Frank is researching ways to get around that justifiability, but in normal circumstances, it's very difficult to consider it viable to play a high value card with the passive strategy. So I believe a passive player would be quite happy to draw a card like this, where maybe it'll do something, maybe it won't, but if it doesn't, passing a turn is what you want to do anyways. With the passive strategy, passing a turn is often optimal. So it's nice to have cards for that strategy that have a very minimal effect, where if it does go off, great. You got to steal a underground station, which means you'll likely get to steal bunnies in the future, meaning you'll have a relatively consistent supply of bunnies. That's great. If not, fine. You weren't planning on doing much with it anyways. Anything else we want to say on this card before we close?
No, I don't think so.
There's a penguin in the background.
There is a penguin in the background.
What Magic Penguins confirmed release?
Psychic Penguins confirmed.
Psychic Penguins. Psychic Penguins.
We're still getting support for Psychic Penguins. No, there's no news on that, unfortunately.
And I swear I got a promo card for Psychic Penguins.
Oh yeah,
recently.
there was one in Conquest Starter. Oh
That
no,
was what it was.
Conquest Red
That's what it was.
has a promo. Yeah.
I just bought that like 6
Oh,
months
yeah.
ago. Therefore, it's new to me.
Uh,
Therefore,
Yeah.
it's coming out soon.
Yes. Some background on Psychic Penguins for those who don't know. It was originally going to be released around 2013, I believe. But because of some issues with Playroom, it never was actually released, so that was a sad day. But maybe in the future, we don't know. It is a quote-unquote complete game. The game is completely designed, all the artwork and everything, so it's only a matter of Ultra Pro making that decision, essentially, or for Jeff to gain the rights back.
Oh yeah, that's fun. Never sell the rights to anything because they'll take it from you and say, sure, we'll do this, and then they'll never do it.
I suppose so. Although,
What happened to the guy that made Dungeons and Dragons?
yeah, I suppose. Yeah. Although Psychic Penguins, same goes for Jupiter, by the way. Jupiter had expansions that were never released as well. Jupiter and Penguins, well, I know for Jupiter and maybe for Penguins from the description there's a board game geek page for it. There are components that are difficult to produce, so that the company that's printing them, there's a big, basically down payment. But that's how business works, I guess. So it might be
only there
difficult.
was some website where people could fund these games ahead
I
of time.
know,
like,
right? Yeah.
Where we could start these games, like kick them alive with money.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Although I don't know what the Kickstarter community would think of Ultra Pro starting a Kickstarter. Has that happened before? I don't know the history.
I mean, Terraforming Mars was just on Kickstarter. That's kind of a big
Okay.
game.
Oh, it was a big company though.
That I'm not sure.
I've played Terraforming Mars. I can't remember what company developed it, but possible that is an option. I mean, we just had the bunny box on the Kickstarter, and that was exciting. I can't wait for that to come out. I believe that's being shipped in December. But anyways, we're getting off topic now. Now we're just rambling. Anything else we wanted to say before we close?
Maple does not sparkle.
Maple sparkles. How dare you? You're not
shall
coming back
never
on the
be on
show.
our podcast again.
How dare
Sorry,
you?
you gotta tell the truth.
How dare you speak such heresy? Have you not seen the images?
I'm sorry. The truth has got to be said. It glows.
I'm making an official statement for those here at Bunny Banter, saying that Maple does sparkle, and at the release of Maple Sparkle, we will get more people to do the challenge. Okay. So now that we know that Joe can never come back on the show again. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you. I was going to say thank you, Joe, but not anymore. Thank you for guesting today. If anyone would like to send in any topic ideas or would like to be a potential future guest, contact me in whatever way you see fit. I believe sending me a homing pigeon is the best way. As
go.
Mikey said on the previous episode, or something like that. I also accept smoke signals, so keep that in mind. Although I'll need an interpreter is the problem. So if anyone would like to send in future topics or potential guests, send me a smoke signal. And this was the last episode before London release, so we do have our next series of episodes planned out, so I'll leave that as a surprise for 2 weeks from now, but keep an eye out for that. Anything you'd like to say, Mikey?
Well, okay, so I'm going to try to say this with a British accent because we're doing London's coming out. So, Jeff bless.
Jeff bless.
Jeff bless.